Welcome, everyone. I'm Tracy Fitzpatrick, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Netcom Learning, a market leader in promoting lifelong learning, training, and talent development solutions. We are very excited to host today's event, AWS Discovery Day, Strategies and Tools to Perform Large-Scale Migrations. And presenting today's topic is Terumi. Terumi is an Amazon AAI training consultant and author holding more than 25 years of experience in IT. Her passion for cloud computing developed at a very early age. Being a teenager, she always showed her enthusiasm for understanding the technologies that make computers tick. This deep sense of curiosity on technology led her to achieve all the associate, professional, and specialty certifications and was recognized as an AWS Authorized Instructor Champion. Now, please bear in mind that this is an overview of a very robust topic. We offer a collection of technical and business courses that can be tailored to your specific requirements. If you are interested in a further discussion, you can make an appointment with our learning consultants through our website at netcomlearning.com. Today's session is also being recorded, so you'll get free access to the recording in the next 24 hours via email. Netcom Learning helps customers build innovative learning organizations by achieving a smarter workforce, adapting to change, and driving growth. We do this with a broad catalog of offerings, developing customized learning plans, and our global delivery capabilities. Since 1998, we have been empowering organizations with our managed learning services to help them reach optimal performance results and address challenges. We do have 9 practice areas in which we specialize. They encompass people, process, and technology training. Today's presentation is from the Cloud Practice Area. Netcom Learning offers a comprehensive training portfolio of courses for the topic being covered today. Our upcoming classes include various trainings on the given courses. You can also access a variety of marketing assets, such as the free training and blogs, by clicking on the available event handout. These offerings can be found with a simple search on our website at netcomlearning.com. This session will help IT business decision makers and individuals who seek an overall understanding of migrating to the cloud to learn about the AWS strategy and best practices for performing large-scale cloud migrations. And now I would like to give you a quick overview of the logistics before we get started. To begin with, you do have the option to view in full screen by clicking on the full screen button on the right side of the GoToWebinar viewer. Simply hit the escape key to exit the full screen. Everyone has been muted except for our presenters. Feel free to submit any questions you have for the presenters here in the questions pane, and we will address them at the end of the session. And to get the best out of today's events, we've included the slides, courses we talk about, and marketing assets in the handout section of your GoToWebinar viewer. You may refer to them at any time to get a better understanding of today's topic. And we do realize that some of you may have to leave early and want to let you know that as you do leave the session today, you will be presented with a short survey. We would like to request for you to take a quick moment to participate in that survey. Your feedback really helps us understand your learning experience and improve our future sessions for you. The survey answers are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing outstanding and 1 representing poor. And now I'd like to pass this over to our trainer to present today's topic. Hey, Terumi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today's AWS Discovery Day. Today's topic is strategies and tools to perform large-scale migrations. And my name is Terumi Laskowski, and I'm going to be with you for the next hour to 90 minutes on this topic. Now, today's topic, because it is migration, it involves lots of skills, including knowledge of cloud skills, as well as knowledge of on-premises skills, knowledge of server skills, application skills, and such. There's so much that's involved in migration in general. So for the next 60 minutes, I'm going to be introducing you to the AWS's migration framework and strategies. So it's going to be mostly me talking about lecturing, giving you a lecture, as well as introducing you to the AWS websites that you can go to later on. There's not going to be any hands-on demonstration this time around because it's a little hard to do a hands-on on the migration stuff. So let's get started. So today's agenda mainly focuses around 6 topics. Now we will have on the 7th, we'll have a Q&A session at the end as well. All right, so the first one, explore the primary drivers for moving to AWS Cloud. So why do we want to move into the cloud anyway, right? So let's go and take a look at that. Then on number 2, discover the migration process. So there are many migration processes, but AWS has done tons of cloud migration. So they will share with you their framework on how to migrate. Number 3, learn about migration readiness assessment. So this is part of a framework for an assessment. So it's a good way for you to find out if you're ready for migration at all. So that we're going to be covering on the 3rd topic. 4th topic, discover the migration readiness and planning process. This once again is an AWS best practice on how do you get yourself ready and to move forward with migration. Number 5, learn about common application migration strategies. This actually is pretty interesting one for me as well, is that I'll introduce you to 7 different options that you have on the whether you're going to migrate your application or not to the cloud, depending upon certain criteria. And if you are, there are some options as to different ways you can migrate. And last but not least, we'll look at the Explore AWS tools and services that you can accelerate the migration process. So these are services that are offered by AWS as well as AWS partners and tools provided by AWS. Some are free and some are not free. All right, so let's get started. The first part right here is to explore the primary drivers for moving to AWS Cloud. As I say, why do we want to move into the cloud anyway, right? And this section is going to be very helpful for you if you have to justify the migration to the cloud. So justify as far as justifying to the businesses, right? Because after all, these expenses are going to be paid by the business in the end. All right, so let's take a look. Now, there's going to be a website. So there is a AWS migration website that's dedicated to this particular topic. Okay, so let me go ahead and move in there and see to introduce you to this web page. All right, so here we are. So this is the AWS's Migrate, Modernize with AWS website. And the link is going to be in the presentation. And there it is, right? So why do we migrate to AWS? Okay, if you look at it, let's take a look. Up to 66% infrastructure cost savings. Okay, of course, there is an asterisk to it. Up to 77% reduction in licensing required. All good things, right? Okay, so if you want to look at the latest and greatest information as to the ideas and some of the criteria that you look for to say, okay, this is the reason why we're migrating to AWS, this would be a great page for you. All right, so let me introduce this topic in a little bit more structured way. So I'm going to go back into my slides now. Alrighty, so the primary drivers, okay, and there are many, right? But the primary drivers are these, okay? So there are 8 primary drivers, and I'm going to cover very briefly on each one of them, but I did put them in the order of importance. A lot of companies move to the cloud because they're driven by cost efficiency or, let's say cost savings. Okay, scalability and flexibility. Scalability is the name of the game when it comes to the cloud. The definition of cloud computing includes the fact that it must be scalable, highly scalable, right? Security and compliance. Okay, so if you have your own security team, if you have your own compliance team, you may be good to go here. But if you don't, or if you are really, system is very expensive and security and compliance is a lot of work, then moving to the cloud might be a good reason for you. Innovation and speed, business continuity, global reach, focus on core business, and last but not least, community and ecosystem. So let's take a look and see what each one of these things look like. Cost efficiency. Cloud is basically you pay for only things that you use, right? So you don't have to pay in advance if you don't want to. You don't have to buy hardware in advance, right? So you only pay for what you use. So if you want more servers, you pay more. If you have less servers, you pay less. And you can shift between more and less dynamically. So it is very efficient when it comes to eliminating unnecessary costs, right? And scales of economy, right? Or economies of scale, whichever ones. And you probably got introduced to economies of scales in your econ classes in high school or college, where someone has lots of something like AWS. They have lots and lots of servers, and when they do, to a certain point, each and every one of the servers will be cheaper than if you were trying to buy the same server, right? So you could take advantage of the fact that AWS has massive scale, and that you can take advantage of the cost savings due to economies of scale. So there you go. That just kind of makes sense, right? And by the way, a lot of companies move because of this particular driver, right? This is a huge one. Next one is scalability and flexibility. So as I mentioned, the definition of cloud computing states that the cloud computing must be able to do a dynamic horizontal scaling, right? Or vertical scaling in most cases as well. So automatic scaling is one of the good things, right, that you can have when you go into the cloud. Not that you can't have them in your on premises, but it's much easier. It's kind of built into the definition of the cloud. Wide range of services. AWS has hundreds of services available, right? So even the services that you may not have been able to use because it was too cost prohibitive, technology prohibitive, it's there for you in AWS. And a lot of these services do have some free tiers that you can try out. So that will be another benefit of moving into AWS Cloud. Security and compliance, strong security measures. AWS, after all, is protecting the resources of all the customers, right, including themselves. So they have security done right, okay? And if you are pretty confident that you have it done right, then okay, that might be a good thing. But if you don't, then AWS might be a good vendor to look at and use their systems because of their very strong security and compliance. By the way, compliance, AWS has complied to numerous amount of third-party audits, and you may want to take a look at that on AWS and make sure that whatever the compliance you're looking for, whatever the industry, whichever country that you're in, that AWS has the compliance for the what you're looking for in your business. Okay. Next one here is innovation and speed, right? Quick deployment. Well, okay, so the reason why it's quick in the cloud is because a lot of the resources that we'll be using, well, most of the resources that we need are all virtual. And, by definition, because virtual, you don't have to buy physical hardware, etc., that it is in general much, much faster, right? So for example, when I was handling physical servers, if someone would ask me, hey, set up a Windows server, okay, given that if the server is already there, it probably took me like a couple hours, okay? But on AWS, it only takes me, like 2 minutes, okay? So it's very quick. Agility, because it is quick and because of the flexibility of scaling, that we could be very agile about what's happening. So if there's a lot of requests, I can increase the number of servers automatically, remember by auto scaling, or if there's a reduction in requests, then I will automatically scale back in, right? So that I have fewer servers, so I don't pay for excessive capacity. So that agility is a benefit of virtualness, and of course, cloud is backed by virtualization technologies. Next one, business continuity. So what is a business continuity, right? So the business continuity is being able to proceed and perform your business even under certain adverse circumstances. Maybe it's a natural disaster, maybe it's a man-made disaster, what have you. You don't want to close your shutters of your stores all the way down, right? So business continuity means that maybe you are, running your business at a reduced scale, reduce capacity due to some, disasters happening, but you're able to still continue on with your business, right? So disaster recovery, high availability are all part and parcel of continuing your business under adverse conditions. And because the cloud is very flexible, it's very virtual, and that you can take advantage of all the different locations that AWS has, and AWS has, I believe, currently 30, over 30. I'm trying to remember if it's 31 locations or 36 locations. I know they've added some locations. So you have all those places available as a backup if you want to. So there you go, business continuity purposes. Global reach, yes, as I mentioned, AWS has like 30 some odd locations throughout the world. And so it's a global infrastructure, obviously, and you could take advantage of those locations to do a backup. So I have some customers that are in Tokyo. Tokyo is earthquake city, and so and Tokyo has data centers that the AWS uses, but you don't have to just deploy your infrastructure in Tokyo. You could do a backup if you want, or have a redundant system in United States if you want, or other Asian countries that AWS has presence in. So multi-regional backups are a major advantage when you go into the cloud. Next one, focus on core business. So this is true. It's actually one of the reasons that you would use any kind of outsourcing, right? Because outsourcing means that you say, oh, my time, my money will be better spent on doing something else that really contributes to differentiating my businesses, rather than doing things that are common to all the other competitors in my industry, let's say, for example. So for something like system infrastructure, these days every companies will probably need something like that. But is it your core is it your core business to create an infrastructure for your applications? And a lot of times, unless you're an IT business, that's not going to be your core business. Your core business is your application, it's your services. So to outsource that portion, or to have somebody else look at the parts that's not your core business, is really advantageous to everyone, right? So there you go. Focus on core business. Perhaps use some managed services on AWS so that the AWS can manage your services for you, so you can concentrate on coming up with fantastic services to beat the competition. Okay, so the next one here is community and ecosystem, and this is actually the last driver. So AWS has been around for a while, and it's one of the older, long-lasting cloud vendor. So it has a extensive community of supporters and users, and also these supporters and partners create products for AWS, and they're in things like AWS Marketplace, third-party tools and integrations. Now, there is a program called APN, AWS Partner Network, that will be able to assist you, especially in migration. So there are companies that specialize in migration, so that you can consult with them. They can provide services, etc. Open source, GitHub, user groups. And by the way, the AWS reInvent and AWS Summits has great presentation materials on the latest and greatest. So I highly suggest you at least take part of it if you are able to, or take a look at some of the highlights in YouTube videos. That's what I do too. Anyway, so these are some of the great drivers for moving into the cloud. Okay, so once again, here's a list: cost efficiency, scalability and flexibility, security and compliance, innovation and speed, business continuity, global reach, focus on core business, community and ecosystems. That should be plenty, right? Hopefully, to justify in yourself that, yeah, migration to the cloud is something that is worth doing. Okay, moving on to the second part of the agenda is discovering the migration process. So here comes the nitty-gritty. That is, how do you do this thing? So if we're going to do the migration process, and like I said, migration is tricky because it usually means that you're moving things from one thing to another thing, right? So normally you're moving from on-premises into AWS Cloud. And because it is a totally different environment, and it's somebody else's environment, right? You're moving into AWS environment, there's going to be risk associated with any kind of change. And migration is a huge change, right? So having a good process in place is going to be very, very helpful to reduce the risk so that you can reap the benefits of migration. So there is a migration process. The same website that I showed you earlier actually has a section on the cloud migration process. So let me go ahead and show you that website right now. Okay, I believe, let's see here. I thought I went to it, so let me see. Yeah, there we go. So, sorry, that was the second tab. All right, so here we go. So how to migrate, okay. Now, rather than having a very long, very detailed migration process, AWS actually chose to kind of simplify the migration process. So it's basically these 3 steps. So it's a assess phase, mobilize phase, and migrate and modernize phase. So they keep it nice and simple, and I think that's very, very helpful. By the way, you probably will hear a little bit later on, but AWS actually has a official course around this whole process. Okay. Anyway, so assess, mobilize, migrate, and modernize. And here below, they have tabs in here. So assess, mobilize, migrate, right? So you can actually go through these. But let me once again give it to you in my presentation as well. Okay. So here's the process. The migration process, right? Assess phase, mobilize phase, migration phase. So this is the AWS's own framework for guiding the migration. And they've assisted customers in doing migrations in the thousands, right? I believe. All right, so let's take a look and see what do we do then in each of these phases. Well, assessment phase. Okay, so the assessment phase, actually, the very important things that we have to do in the assessment phase is to make sure that it makes sense for you to migrate, right? And so that, in another word, is business case. So it's very, very crucial to get the buy-in from the businesses, right? So if the businesses don't see the value, you're not going to be supported in then doing this risky thing, right? Which is migration. Okay, some things like return on investment, right? Like, what are the objectives? Like, why are we doing this? And how is this going to benefit the business, right? So that's the making the business case. Just to get into the rest of the phases, okay? And there is something called the readiness assessment. So the readiness assessment, and there are tools around it, and I have it in there, Cloud Adoption Readiness Tool card. But there are other tools as well. And by the way, I have a tools section later on in the presentation. But the readiness assessment basically saying, hey, are you ready? I know you want to, or you may want to migrate, but do you have people that can do this? Do you know what you have, and do you know what you want to move? Like, are you ready? Right. So that's the readiness assessment. Okay. And of course, the total cost of ownership analysis. And usually the total cost of ownership analysis, or TCO analysis, understanding the cost involved. And even though as an objective, right, remember the driver was cost efficiency, that once you move into the cloud, that you're going to get the benefit of the cost efficiency, there's going to be increased cost involved in doing the migration, right? Because migration itself is going to be an entire program, projects, right? You have maybe different people assigned to these programs. So that's going to be an increased cost. So that has to be counted into the total cost analysis of the migration. Okay, and also education, right? Because take, for example, something like systems operation. Right now, if you have 100% in the on-premises, your operations people are operating obviously in on-premises. But when you move things into the cloud, now they have to operate on systems, the day-to-day maintenance, monitoring, etc., updating. they have to do that now in the cloud. And in some situations, they may have to do in a hybrid environment where they have to do the on-premises operation as well as the cloud operation. And that's a lot, it will involve education as well, right? And that also involves time. Okay, so anyway, so that needs to happen. And then migration plan, sure, like who's going to do what, who's going to be responsible for what, and that is going to be deciding on which workload, which application, which servers, which network, etc. Okay, so there you go. So that's the assessment phase. By the way, there is the the website. Remember that tab, right? So there is a assessment phase tab there too if you want to know more about it. Okay. Next one is the mobilize phase. So if you make the cut, right, and the business says, yeah, right, you made a great case for mobilizing and to go into the cloud, great, now you're in this phase. Okay, now here you have to now further go more into detail and refine the business case, right? So because as you mobilize, now it may not be the entire business, but maybe some business line, maybe certain departments, right? And individually, you have to make the business case for them to move as well, right? So it has to be revised, it has to be refined based on the details of the migration plan that you have. So business use case and business case is pretty important, okay? Then the skills training, right? So as I mentioned, take, for example, systems operation people, yeah, ensuring the team understands AWS, right? So if you don't understand AWS, you may be able to use some third-party services, but eventually, that's going to be your system. So yeah, education process has to start. Then you have the migration tools and services. Yeah, these tools will be very helpful and reduce the risk that you may otherwise be incurring. So check out the tools and all the services that are available and pick and choose the one that you need. And this is a phase where you can actually do a test migration of a very small system so that you could show, like a proof of concept and say, okay, this is how it would work and see how we succeeded, right? So testing and maybe testing the operation process too. So, but the key here is not to actually do the migration of your major systems, right? So this is about a small system, okay, non-critical system, right? So that it affords you the opportunity for you to practice and maybe make mistakes, but it's not going to negatively, massively impact your business, right? So this is a proof of concept, okay? Make sure that, you pick things that are not risky so that you can gain skills, okay? So there you go. So this is basically what you do in the mobilization phase. This is a pretty hefty phase as well. And it's almost like doing homework before you do something for reals. This is the homework phase, okay? And once you finish with the, spend the time and spend your effort in doing great homework for your migration, now you're ready for the next phase, which is actually the migration modernization phase. Now, if you to take the course, the way we define this place is like a factory. Okay, it's because we've done such a good work on the mobilization phase. Now everything is like clockwork. It says, okay, let's pick this application. We got like 10 applications, 10 workloads that we have to move. And here are the steps, 1, 2, 3, and here are your teams. So you just like move like clockwork. Okay, so it's about portfolio migration. So the groups of applications usually move together because of dependencies. So, and you have multiple groupings. So you have portfolio of applications. Then you also have to move not just application, but the data itself, right? And sometimes you have massive amounts of data. Sometimes you have data that is time critical. Sometimes you have data that maybe, requires more security than others. So data migration is a pretty big part. Application migration, sure. And we will be talking about the different strategies on application migration, which comes up in later sections. And then after you are able to get your foothold into AWS, right? And once you know that, okay, it's working now, right? And I'm going to start learning how to work with this cloud environment. After that, after you feel comfortable with that, now you can start to optimize, right? So maybe you could just go ahead and start to, look at other strategies for the migration and move into something that leverages the cloud capabilities a lot more, let's say, than how you initially move into it, okay? And this will make a lot more sense once we get into the application migration strategies, right? And there are 7 strategies that we'll be talking about. Anyway, optimization, okay? That means as you gain your knowledge, you're able to work with the cloud and take advantage of the cloud a lot more for your business. There you go. So these are the migration processes, okay? And once again, I just want to tell you, right? So it is assess, mobilize, and migrate, and modernize. Okay, so there we go. Alrighty, so now let's move into the next section. By the way, we're going to have a break after this section, right? We're going to have a short break. Anyway, so let's talk about learning about the migration readiness assessment. Okay, migration readiness assessment. Okay, all right, so what is that? Okay, so here we are. We call it MRA, okay, migration readiness assessment. And it's part of the assess phase. So it's the very first phase, okay? And if you remember, the assess phase was about, creating the business case, identifying your drivers, etc., right? So that means it's all about making sure that your organization is ready, right? And if you're not ready, what are the gaps, right? So that you can become ready, okay, to migrate. So this is a very critical phase of the transition to the cloud, right? So it's pretty comprehensive analysis. It has several critical dimensions such as technical, business, and etc. So it's a pretty important process, okay? Now let's take a look at it. By the way, MRA does have a website or the web page in the migration scheme, but I'm not going to go there right now, okay? So the first thing you will need to have the migration readiness assessment is the objective, right? So why are we doing this, okay? So it's basically about finding the gaps, like where are you not ready, right? So recognize any gaps, okay, and any capabilities or any best practices that you are not aware of. Okay, so that's identifying the gaps, okay, so that you can be successful in yourself or ready, prepared for migration. Next one is risk assessment. Okay, so as I mentioned, moving things, right? Not just migration in the cloud, but moving things in general just has lots of risk. Okay, a lot of people say, well, why are we fixing it if it's not broken? Well, there are many reasons why you want to modernize, right? Those are the drivers. But risk is also, important for you to understand, so that just in case, right? So you have, plan B, okay, when something were to happen. So evaluate the risk that could affect a smooth transition into the cloud. And then also, one more time, business case is always important because businesses have to champion for you that the migration is good for the business, right? And because of the risk and because of the cost that you're going to be incurring. Like I said, there's going to be cost involved in doing the migration work, okay? Doing this MRA will have costs as well. Another thing is there's something called the Cloud Adoption Framework that AWS has. So let me show you what this is. So the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, we call the AWS CAF. Okay, so it's basically all the best practices that's going to help you to transform your business into the cloud. And so this is going to help you, give you more details about, okay, exactly what are we going to enhance in our business by moving into the cloud. So looking at the cloud adoption framework, and normally the objectives, you are comparing yourself as to say, okay, so here's the cloud adoption framework. Okay, here are all the best practices. And which one are we going to do this again? And do we have the prerequisite skills or partners that's going to help us do this, right? So that's what the MRA is going to clarify for you. Okay, so this is a great reference for coming up with the exactly what benefit you're looking for in the cloud. So that's going to be the objective. Okay. The next thing about the MRA is the methodology. So how do you do this, right? How do you, where are the steps and stuff? Well, you have some options. So you can do this on your own. So there is a self-assessment. So many companies will start with self-assessment first, right? By using the steps that are in the AWS websites, in AWS training, and perhaps in my presentation as well. You get some ideas as to, okay, so there's a calf, so let's go and take a look and see, which part we want to actually take advantage of, okay? And what type of best practices and what skills we lack. But if you are really like already bought into the migration and you just need help, right, as to the scale of migration and where you're going to concentrate, you may want to use a third-party assessment. Right? So the MRA could be, the vendors could be found in the marketplace. AWS, you can engage AWS, the services to do the third-party assessment, like consulting services. And there are also questionnaires and surveys that you could take advantage of, okay? And also stakeholder interviews. So discussion with key people involved in the migration, see what they have to say about it, right? So, you may surprise yourself by finding, people within your company that has done something similar, or, they understand perhaps the issues that they may face if you were to migrate certain things over into the cloud. Anyway, so these are the methodologies, okay? And last but not least, what are we looking for here? So as an output, we should have a readiness report, right? So the MRA usually ends up in a detailed report that's telling you, what is your readiness profile? What are the gaps, okay? And what's the next step? Okay, so that's what you're looking for. And also the migration plan. So you will be refining this as the process goes forward, but you should have a pretty good ballpark as to what the migration plan is. The entire plan, like, how big is it? Is it going to be just, just part of the organization? Is it going to be mostly the entire organization? Now, some companies choose to migrate because they are vacating their data centers, right? So if they're vacating the data center, there may be some deadlines, and now you really have no choice but to move everything out of the data center, right? Not necessarily that everything is going to go into the cloud, right? Which I'll cover a little bit later on, but because of that, there may be some time sensitivity into the move. Okay, so there you go. So that's the readiness output, and once again, the MRA is the readiness assessment. Okay, it's what you do during the assessment phase. And just to kind of review the assessment phase, right? Because the MRA is supporting this phase right here, making the business case, readiness assessment, right? The TCO analysis, migration planning. See, that's basically what the MRA covers. All right, so I hope that gave you some clear steps, and we just talked about learn and migrate readiness assessment. So let's go and take a short break between now and the next topic. Thank you.
We are now going to take a 5-minute break, but before we do that, we are going to launch a quick poll that we want to invite you to participate in. Doing so helps us know how we can better serve you by telling us who might be interested in more information or in taking some additional training. In addition, we have a lot more informative webinars coming up, so please go to netcomlearning.com/webinars in order to register.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So the next topic we will cover is discover the migration readiness and planning process. Okay, so now that we've done the migration readiness assessment, the next part is the step number 4. So what's that all about? Well, this is called the MRP. Okay, so migration readiness and planning process, MRP. So what is it? Okay, so the MRP is a very structured way for you to plan for a large-scale migration, right? So this webinar is all about large-scale migration. And when we're talking about large-scale, like if you're doing a smaller scale migration, maybe one workload, just, tens and maybe even like 100 workloads, it's still considered to be smaller. But when you're doing larger, it takes larger organization, more coordination. So rather than having projects, you may have multiple projects and make it into a program, right? So you may have a program manager, right? So it becomes more of a migration organization. They have to manage the portfolio of projects, okay? Anyway, so that's what this migration readiness planning is going to help you to do, to manage this whole process, right? So the MRP usually happens after you finish with the MRA, which is the migration readiness assessment that we talked about in topic number 3. Okay, and remember, this is where you identify the gaps, right? So what are some of these activities within this process? So I have in here 6 process steps, which are discovery analysis, business case development, planning, centers of excellence in development, security and compliance, and validation. So let's take a look and see what each one of these things entail. Number 1, okay, discovery and analysis. Right? So now you're actually getting into more detailed, analysis as to, okay, what do we have as systems that could be moved, okay? And let's take an inventory of that, right? So collect documents. Do you know where your systems are? Maybe there are distributed systems that has dependencies on other systems. So you have to be careful, right? Because when you migrate something that has dependencies, you may have to move those dependent systems, as a group, or have some way to making sure that you can still have access to those dependent systems after parts of the system moves into the cloud, right? It becomes a little bit more complex. And like I said, it's risky, but right, you have to do that. And then when you take inventory of these applications or workloads, right, they're used interchangeably anyway, the workload and the applications, but you have to analyze the workload, right? Look at the complexity of your application. By the way, when I say application, it doesn't mean just one thing. We're talking about business application, which may actually has multiple, like an application that what you consider as being in systems. So we're talking about something that adds business value. Okay, so that's a workload. So evaluate complexity, dependencies, what are the technical requirements, and all that. So now you start getting detailed information about all the systems that are under review to be migrated. Okay, so you're discovering it. Okay. Then you have to create a business case for moving that into the cloud. Right, so you have to come up with the total cost of ownership that we've covered earlier. So you can run model for running your workload on AWS compared to keep on running them on premises, right? So that's usually the business case, and say, okay, so why are we moving it? Maybe it's okay, just have it in on premises. What are the advantages and what are the cost advantages, or what are other non-cost related advantages once we move into the cloud? By the way, here I think I need to mention that even though the initial motivation for companies to move a particular workload into AWS is cost, there are other, in fact, AWS does mention that there are actually a lot more benefits that has nothing to do with cost, but has to do with everything else. That is the evolution, flexibility, the scalability, all those other things that don't directly show up on the cost benefits, right? So So when we're looking at the drivers, cost was just one of 8 drivers that we have, okay? So this is where you're looking for, that is when you're comparing things. But the cost is also important because businesses understand costs, right? Numbers are usually, good data to have to convince someone, to show them proof that this is our model. And also, when you do this kind of cost analysis, after you move into the cloud, you can also say, see, now that we moved into the cloud, look at the output, and let's compare with what we said before we moved. So that could also show you that, yes, we're actually indeed see the benefit that you mentioned when we're doing the planning phase. So it's nice to have those numbers, and also the return on investment calculation, right? Because after all, this is all about business case. What is the ROI, right? What is the cost and effort of migration, and how does that relate to increased benefits, increased sales, increased customers, increased efficiency, what have you, that you can use for the ROI calculation. So there you go, business case. Okay. The next one is planning. So planning is pretty critical when it comes to large-scale migration. So we're talking about migration planning, comprehensive plan, the schedules, who do we need, what teams, what are the risks, okay? And what is plan B, right? And what are all the logistical things? Do we have to actually physically move the data? So we'll talk about things, especially if you're moving something like a data center, you're not going to be able to, transfer the data using the internet or even some dedicated lines. The data usually is a lot bigger, and you don't have enough time to allow for that data transfer through those, like the internet connections. And sometimes you may have to actually move it physically, right? And those are the snowballs and the snow family tools that the AWS will have. But that does take more time. You have to wait for the hardware to arrive, and you have to put the data in there and move it back, and the AWS will take the data and they'll process the data for you. But you do have to plan for those things, right? So that's the migration planning. Application portfolio analysis, as I mentioned, you may have a bunch of workloads, tons of applications, and you may have multiple projects, right? Project teams. So you have to prioritize which one goes first, right? So remember, during the mobilization phase, there was a part where you actually did the prototyping, right? So the prototyping was the small workloads, not business critical applications. So which one do you move? The advice is to start small, and then eventually, as you gain experience in moving into the cloud and start operating in the cloud, that you start moving into more complex and larger migration. But first, start small, okay? And yes, it's, your migration is not over just because something has moved. You have to pick up the ball and start operation work on the things that you move into the cloud as well, right? So the new phase of your business starts once things go into the to the AWS. So portfolio analysis will take into account, are you ready to operate on the workload that gets moved into AWS as well? Okay. Then migration tools and techniques. So, one has to learn about AWS. If you don't have knowledge about AWS, then learn about the migration tools that you could take advantage of. And also some of the best practices, these are the techniques, right? And we'll talk about the strategies a little bit later on. There you go. So that's planning. Okay. Next one is skills and center of excellence development. So I have already been kind of mentioning the fact that you have to start small and start gaining experience, then it'll snowball, right? Right into you'll be able to operate fine, feel comfortable on the AWS, and start operating on these applications. And the actual migration will work like a factory work, right? So you churn out all these migration if you have hundreds, if not thousands, of workloads that you have to move into AWS, okay? Well, does everybody in your company have to have this skill? And the answer is no, right? So if you have identified a group of people who's going to be involved in this whole process, they can start to become proficient. They can be your excellence, right? Center of excellence for developing that. That means you have a group of people that other parts of the company can go to and say, hey, we're thinking about migrating our workload. Can you give us some ideas? What's involved? What are the risks? And by the way, can you help us out? Right? So you have a group of people, perhaps a department or maybe a project group or program group that other parts of the companies can go to. So acquiring the skills, accumulating the knowledge, and servicing and making the whole migration process improve as you move forward. Okay, so training, establish these teams are pretty important in this whole process. The next part is security and compliance, right? Now, not everything can be moved to the cloud. This is a different discussion, but as you move your workload, you have to identify, does this workload have data or anything in there which is proprietary, which is private, which is sensitive, which may also have some limitation due to data sovereignty rules, compliance rules, right? So make sure you don't move things that you're really not supposed to move, right? So you don't break compliance. But it is possible for you to move things that are sensitive as long as you have security measures around it. Okay, so need to do security assessment to ensure that all security controls our security measures, and compliance requirements are addressed in the cloud environment. Okay, you have to do that. Obviously, you cannot be doing that after you move it. Okay, data governance, right? Make sure that the privacy, residency. When we say residency means I have customers in Japan where some customer information cannot be moved into the cloud. For example, okay. So that would be the residency requirement, right? So it's okay, the data must reside in Japan. Okay. So if that's the case, you can't really take advantage of all the other regions within the AWS that's outside of Japan, for example, right? Because it's so easy to do things in the cloud, just by, it's almost like copy and pasting data from one region to another. You have to make sure that there are security controls around it so people cannot do that, right? But that depends upon each and every workload. So it has to be in your detailed planning as to which data must meet those requirements and which data is a little bit more freer as to the movement. And also, make sure that the AWS environment itself meets the compliance requirement for your company. So if depending upon your industry, you may require your vendors to be certified under certain data governance requirements or compliance requirements. And AWS is compliant on the number of third-party audits, as I mentioned. So check it out and make sure that the one that you're looking for, AWS does indeed have been audited for it. All right, and next one is validation. So this is the last step within this MRP, validation, proof of concept, right? Start small, right? Before full-scale migration, yeah, please don't, okay? Make sure you do a POC to make sure that all your strategies and your